fundamentally, what is the value of owning a music NFT?
I think the value of anything in this space is the experimental concept of it. You need to experiment from your point of view, whether you're a creative, whether you're a curator, or whether you're a collector. I'm buying NFTs of artists that I admire and I like musically in the same way that I would have bought their records or whatever. But the beautiful thing about buying their NFTs is I can actually connect with them directly.
GM, welcome to GM Good Music, a music NFT podcast where we explore the future of music and the artists paving the way. I'm your host, Josh Savage, and today I'm thrilled to introduce a fellow UK music NFT pioneer, a man who has worn many hats in the music industry, from DJing at the most prominent clubs globally to producing chart-topping hits for the likes of Kanye West, Michael Jackson, and many more. He's a visionary, constantly pushing the boundaries in the music industry and now venturing into the exciting world of music NFTs. Let's dive deep into the journey of the one and only TommyD. Tommy, how are you, brother?
I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Josh. It's always a pleasure talking to you and to everybody. And, we share the same love and affection for this whole space, not just for the music, but also for everything that we're doing with the technology and the people in it. So yeah, I'm super excited to spill my guts.
And so good to have you do that. So thank you for your time, Tommy. Let's just start to the beginning. Can you walk us through the very beginning, your first steps, early life, and how your family's background in the performing arts influenced your career to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I've had a very charmed life. I've been super lucky. First bit of luck I think I had was to be born to two incredible human beings, my mum and dad, who are both very, very interesting, creative, mad, bonkers people. I'm sure everybody thinks their mum and dad are pretty much the same.
So that's where you get it from.
Yeah, it is. My dad's an actor, or was an actor, sadly passed away a couple of years back. And my mum was an actress, but she then packed it up when all of us kids come along, and she became a chef, and she was a cook, and we eventually bought a restaurant, and I was brought up mostly above a restaurant. So I had this really interesting background of sort of entertainment and hospitality, kind of intertwined. My dad wasn't a particularly famous actor, but he was a jobbing actor. He was a great singer. My sister's an amazing singer. My whole family are in the entertainment industry. My uncles and aunts, everybody, they're all fit. Both my uncles one of my uncles was a film director. Another one of my uncles was a TV executive. Both my grandfathers were in. Both of them actually. My grandfather was a film director, and my other grandfather was an impresario, which is somebody who kind of puts on shows and stuff like that back in the day. So I had a real strong upbringing of theatrical and creativity and music and everything like that. It was right there always from day one. And I went and joined a choir early on and got into absolutely loved singing. And then on my 11th birthday, my Elvis died. Near my 11th birthday, Elvis, the king, as they all say, he died, and I was reading up a thing about him. It said at 11, his dad bought him a guitar. So I was 11. I was like, oh. So I went to see my dad, and I said, Elvis's dad bought him a guitar when he was 11. hint. And so he went out and bought me a guitar.
Oh, legend.
Yeah, it was. Actually, I'm not entirely sure if it was him or probably one of his mates. Because he was a bit of a hustler, my dad. Probably called him up and said, yeah, my son wants a guitar. Could you buy it for him? So he bought me a guitar, and I didn't know how to play it. This is all pre-internet and YouTube and anything like that. There wasn't anything at all like that. So I had a couple of guitar lessons at school.
Where was this, by the way, Tommy?
So this was all in London, in South London, in a place called, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and then we settled in Putney, which is a lovely little leafy area in Putney near the Thames, which was great. But kind of, I mean, it's very, very sort of nice now. It was a bit rougher back in my day, but not particularly. It was quite an easygoing place. I went to a state school. I only went to state schools around there, and it was really at the state school that a friend, actually it was my sister's boyfriend at the time. He was a guitarist, and he taught me the chord of D. So I sat there for a year playing the chord of D, and it was very interesting because that allowed me to really get to understand the kind of nuances of the guitar. You know, it was like I would sit there and I'd just be strumming. Oh, that D sounds different to that D, and that D sounds. So I learned a lot about like picking and stuff like that. I never thought to learn another chord.
It's like so interesting. That's your first chord as well. Usually it's E or G or A, but D's actually for me was quite heartbreaking to play because you'd only play 4 strings on the guitar, and I really wanted to bash the hell out of it when I learned it. But funny enough, today D is my favorite chord to play, but not the traditional one. I have like a alternate like sus.
Is that the chord? Is that the key that you tend to sing in? Is D?
No,
you know, because everybody kind of gravitates towards a certain key, don't they? Is that?
No, I tend to gravitate more towards G, or actually, D a fair amount actually too. Because
or D, they're complementary.
Yeah, because I love sliding up and down the guitar, and it just complements those keys better. And however, I do play with the capo a lot, so that affects the key. But it's basically the same chord shapes generally. I mean, there are only so many at the end of the day. So yeah. So tell me more about your D chords and how that led to the next thing.
D D D D D. I mean, literally like that. D D D. You know, and I'd be like going, "Oh, that's interesting."
Did you ever learn any other chords?
No. Yeah, what happened was I bought the Beatles songbook. And so many of my generation, the Beatles songbook is like the thing that, you know, everybody, you know, if you talk to any guitarist sort of in their 40s and 50s and 60s, you'll find that the Beatles songbook has a Noel Gallagher is a great example. Everybody, you know, you buy the Beatles songbook. And because the brilliant thing about the Beatles songbook is, first of all, the songs are just so brilliant. They're so beautifully crafted, and yet they're so simple, you know. And also, the Beatles songbook had the fingerings of all the chords. So if you didn't know what the chord was, you could just sort of, and of course, I mean, the Beatles were a huge part of my upbringing, massive band for me. So I'd be sitting there with my D, knowing my D, but it was like, oh, there's an A. Oh, that's, and it would show me what the fingerings were. So I'd be sitting there going, and because I knew the song and I knew the melody, I kind of knew what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So it made sense. So then, quite quickly, I learned quite a few chords. And of course, when you learn a bar chord, that's when the world opens up for you. It's like, oh my God, you know, I can slide this thing up and down, and wow, it's amazing. And that was it. And then I went and worked when I was about 16, I got work experience in a music shop in Balham in London. As part of the school, and I went there for 2 weeks, and I loved it so much I asked them for a Saturday job, and they gave me a Saturday job, and then I eventually left school and worked there full time. And that job, that was brilliant because it was full of really interesting musicians and full of really interesting people and characters. It's all South London, and back in that day, you know, we're talking about like I'd say mid 80s. Back then, this was before DJing and before that kind of concept. So it was live music was very much a part of the space.
What a time to be living in London. I've heard, I mean, it's a legendary time to be living in London. Wow. I'm very envious. I
mean, you're absolutely right. There was an exhibition recently at the Saatchi Gallery called In the Streets or In the Streets, something like that. I think it's called that, From the Street, something like that. And it's an absolutely brilliant exhibition. But what it did was I went there and it was like it started with punk rock, and then it went through to hip hop, and then it went through to dance music. And it was basically my life. It basically was entirely my life. That was my life. As I was going to school, it was all about punk rock. And to the latter end of my school, it was the new romantic era, so Duran Duran and that kind of stuff, you know, Spandau Ballet, which morphed into the early stages of hip hop, and the funk scene and the soul boy kind of scene, which morphed into dance music, you know, the beginnings of electronic dance music as we all know it now, house music, and the acid house scene, of course, in the late 80s. And that was really my upbringing, you know, and I was right in the thick of it. There I was in South London, and I was doing clubs and doing parties and DJing and playing in gigs and, as a musician. And, you know, it was an amazing time. And I think at the time there was, you know, you kind of had a feeling that something great was happening here, but you weren't quite sure what, because you're kind of in the middle of it. And, but you could sense that there was something really important happening. And that whole time, I mean, it was brilliant sort of education in music and music culture. I think music culture more maybe than anything, because understanding how music intertwines into our lives so much more than just what we listen to, you know, how we listen to music or the songs we like or whatever. It's just so much more than that. It is the very fabric that you know, we revolves everything that we do. And I think most people don't realize how essential music is to their everyday mood. And we can go on to that more, you know, as we get further down the line into what we're doing here in Web3. But the essence of it, my upbringing, was I was transported to so many musical worlds simultaneously, because that's one of the beautiful things about being in a multicultural, massive city like London, is you are surrounded by multicultural stuff, and every culture has its own music. Every culture, I always say, every culture has four things: its own music, its own food, its own alcohol, and its own accent, which is, you know, it's a matter. I mean, you look at Liverpool and Manchester, they're 10 miles, 50 miles apart, and yet they have two completely different accents and two completely different cultures. It's incredible. And I've always been completely fascinated by that. And I think music is a part of that fascination with human beings as a kind of thing, you know. Music is, why does music do this thing to me? I think that was the curiosity that I got very early on. You know, when I was a kid, before I learned to sing professionally or play any instruments professionally, you know, I was beguiled by music. I was like, how does it do this thing? It's got so much power over me. It makes me feel like this. It makes other people feel like this. We go down the pub on a Friday night and everyone would be playing to a band would be playing. Everyone would be getting up and dancing and singing, and someone else. And then another night, someone would be around the piano, and, you know, and we had all these, you know, as I said, because of my family, it was very, very theatrical. So Christmases were like, you know, 20, 30 people and everyone's singing and getting up and doing things. And it's like, how does music do this to people? What is it about it? And I think I got very intrigued by the technicality of music, how you make these sounds, you know, with your voice, with an instrument. And then when I went and worked in a music shop, I started to learn about drums and keyboards. And then I left that music shop and went into a high-end pro music shop, which was selling like all the high-end pro gear of the day, you know, like multi-track recorders and mixing desks and synths and drum machines and all, and the early stage samplers.
Were you able to test it out?
All of that was, well, I was quite smart, because when I went and did the interview, and I asked him about pay, and he said, well, you get pay and you get commission. And I said, okay. I said, pay me the commission in equipment. I don't want it in money. I want it in equipment. And he was like, okay, yeah. So I was the top selling salesman for 18 months in a row. So I built an entire studio based off of what I'd done in the shop. And I would, you know, and then also I could borrow equipment. So I would, you know, every weekend or something, I'd come back with a new synth or a new this or a new that. And I'd sit over the weekend and I'd mess around with it. And I bought myself an 8-track reel-to-reel tape recorder and a SEC 1882 mixing desk, which was quite a big mixing desk for back in the day. And they definitely didn't need 18 channels, but, you know, okay, I could buy it. And it sounded great. SEC desks were the early stage Mackie desks, sort of Mackie built on top of their design. They were cheap, but they sounded great. And they were really good at like kind of grainy, dubby sort of sound. So I got really into like, and when I started DJing, it was about the same time I was in the music shop, I started DJing, and I used to go clubbing all the time. I was a big clubber, and I loved, you know, and I wanted to sort of be a DJ, and I couldn't work out how to break into it. And then one day, friend of mine said, what did you think of my club? And I said, it's great, but the music was shit. And he said, well, why don't you come play some music? And I was like, yay, great. And I'd turn up next week with like thousands of records. And that was the beginning of my DJing experience. And
did he say that in a way where it was like, oh, do you think if you can do it better, why don't you?
It was very much like that.
And you did.
It was like, well, go on then. And I did, of course, you know.
Hell yeah.
I did do it better, and I rocked it way better, and became the resident DJ for that little club. It's a little club in Putney called Zeta's, and I really cut my teeth on that club, you know. And we used to have really mad. We used to have like this S&M night. So all these guys used to turn up, these like look like bank managers in their suits and a little hold-all bag, and they'd go off into the toilet, and then they'd come out with a total head-to-toe rubber, you know, or a nurse's outfit or something like that.
A casual night out in Berlin.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can totally imagine that. That was the vibe. And they would, you know, that would be, yeah. And I sort of got, you know, in as a because I had a really wide taste in music, and that was a thing very early on that I learned.
That's so powerful.
You know,
wow.
Yeah, don't you think? You know, it's like I didn't gravitate to any one sort of genre in any way. It was like, what's coming at me? Do I like it? And I was really lucky, I think, to have that early on. And then the music would be, you know, and then I would start to dissect it. So I immersed myself in how musicians, basically, and artists. So I would read from cover to cover, like every single autobiography of any artist I could find. I'd go down the library, and it would like whatever, Bob Marley or Beethoven or whatever. I'd just immerse myself in every aspect of what they did. Any books that I could find on the recording techniques or anything like this, I would read back to back. I wouldn't know what the fuck they were on about or anything. I'd just be reading them in the hope that I would understand certain bits. So I left school early. I didn't get school, didn't really do anything for me. And I left at 16. And I went to work in the music shop full time. And then I got the sack from there because I was out clubbing all night, and I'd roll in like 11, 12 o'clock, you know, 2 hours after it opened.
Right.
And yeah.
Can I ask you quick, Tommy?
Yeah.
What was that like selling for the first time? Because I feel like one of the biggest weaknesses for artists, especially musicians, is learning how to sell, because having good music is not good enough if you don't have a team around you that can sell for you, and you still will need to sell it to onboard team members. So how did you learn to sell, and did you use that skill to expand your career moving forwards?
I think that is a brilliant observation and a really good question, because you're absolutely right. And I would probably argue that everybody, regardless of whatever it is you do, you should go and work in a shop, because until you get the basics of persuading another human being to part with their cash for something,
or not even cash,
whatever it
time.
is, time,
which is
cash,
as valuable as money.
It is, yeah. You know, go and work in a shoe shop, go and work in a stationeries, go and work in retail, because you will learn about human nature. You will learn about you will learn to understand very quickly about the things that other people are interested in and are valuable to them around that subject. And obviously, you know, when it came to music, I learned to, I mean, it's a brilliant question this mate, because I actually genuinely have never really thought about it this way, but you're absolutely right. I was hanging out with, when I got to the high-end music store, you know, we used to have like John Deacon from Queen. We used to have Brian Eno. You used to have loads of like, you know, West London, South London, rock royalty would come to the shop all the time. And I would get to meet them and talk with them and set up their equipment. I used to set up Brian he knows stuff, you know. And so you'd get chatting with them, and absolutely you would understand what it is. And, you know, so when you're selling them something, you get to know what they might be interested in. It's like, oh yeah, I know Brian really likes this. I know he really likes that. And so I'll sell when this new keyboard comes in and I'm trying to get him to buy it, you know, I'll sell him on the basis of that. So understanding what is going to resonate with the person who you're trying to sell to is a real talent. And I think learning that early on is just going to help you in whatever it is that you do, you know. And you're absolutely right. I mean, arguably, a musician, music creative rather, that doesn't know how to sell what they're doing is just a music creative. They're not a music professional. Because in order to be a music professional, you have to just, unfortunately, bite the bullet and tell people how fucking great you are, and sell it to them, on a point where they just can't. They've got to be part of your world. They've got to be interested in what you're doing.
And we're not taught that.
You don't have to be super mega hustly.
Yeah, we're not. I mean? We're specifically not really taught that in British culture, and that's something I've learned hanging out in the NFT space with all these Americans, is that they're proper pros, but also it's accepted to sell yourself in that way. And from our cultural background, it just seems shameless and almost like cringe. But Americans have to do that because from their social care system and stuff like that, if they're not successful, they're fucked. Whereas in Europe, we have a few more things we can fall back on, like healthcare and stuff, and I guess we just got too comfortable in some way, especially if you want to make your dreams come true and stuff. So actually, yeah, something I've learned so much from Americans is just like, stop acting humble when you want the world, because people might like humble, but if you compare two artists and one's like, I'm the shit, I'm gonna be the next big fucking thing in the entire world, and then you got some other bloke, I'm alright. Like, if you had to bet on one person, one artist, and you didn't hear their music, which one do you go for? Would you really go for the humble one if you had to bank all this money to God knows what? But yeah, so
the only thing I would counter that, well, two points that you make there, apart from everything else, I think I totally agree with. First of all, I think if you are lucky enough to meet a person who can sell on your behalf, and that might be, you might have a band, for example, and you might be the really talented music person, but you might be a bit shy. But someone else in the band, the bass player or the guitarist or whatever, is really outgoing and really outspoken and whatever, and can go out there and sell the band on your behalf, that can work. But also a manager can work. Yeah. And some of the most successful managers I have been around with artists have been there from the start. They've come up with, they've been at school with the artist, or they met them at college or something like that. And they were, they fell in love with the artist's incredible ability, which is often the case. And then they go on to manage them, and they maybe have a bit of experience of being in management themselves, or they have management background or something, possibly, or they're just naturally gifted at it. Management generally is salesmanship. Yeah. I mean, I think the point you're making here is absolutely spot on, that it's all about selling what you do. And then the second thing I would say, which I would kind of counter that, is I don't necessarily go along with this concept that because there is support systems in place, welfare systems in place in the UK, that maybe we're a little less, desperate in that respect. But that, we're not talking about Americans, we're talking about creative people. And I think in general, the problem is that being creative means bearing your soul, and because you've got to connect with other people. And you're not going to connect with other people reading a shopping list. You're going to connect with other people telling your story about how you overcome incredible discomfort or pain or whatever. It could be a love affair. It could be a terrible upbringing. It could be a friendship that just went wrong, or a work boss that's a nightmare, or whatever. It could be anything. But you've got to get that out there, and you've got to convey it in a way that really people are going to go, yeah, fuck, you're telling my story, God, you could be just singing my life, and strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words. It's like that's what you've got to get. And it's I think that we're not very good. We're British people are very guarded. We're very reserved. We're like stiff upper lip and all that bollocks. And coming up with this concept that actually we need to open our souls and bare our souls in order to be creative.
Yeah.
Those two things don't work together. Oil and water, they just don't work together. And that's why that's why I think that's why some of the best musicians come out of Britain, though, because of that dichotomy, because of that constant fight, because it makes you, that kind of reserved thing that we're all brought up with is, no, don't cry. No, just get on with it. Fucking pick yourself up, get on with it. Stop moaning. It's like, and all
music
of that
gives it a medium.
Doesn't go with, but I'm hurting, and I want to tell you all about it so that you can understand it, which is kind of what we do as creatives.
Let's move on to, I guess, when did things start falling into place for you and when did music start becoming your full-time profession, and what would you think are one of the best reasons?
Well, I don't know if it was because of the generation I grew up with because this was, or whether it was just me, but I never was really that interested in money as a thing, as a goal. I love money and it's great having it. But it's not a goal. It was never a kind of, I need to do this because I need, I've got to make money. It was always like, I need to do this because I'm really interested in it, or I'm intrigued by it, or I want to go and meet this person, or I want to talk to them, or something. How can I go over there and do that? I want to go to America because it looks really interesting. It was never like, I need to go and make money, And so I left school and I left work, and I started playing in bands while I was working in the music shop. And then I started going, hang on a minute, this is fucking, dealing with drummers and all this business is a nightmare. And that's when I started DJing. And so DJing opened up a lot for me because it meant I could easily go, I was in control of my own destiny, much like yourself. You stand up there and you play guitar and you don't have to worry about a band. If you're just there. So I could control that kind of concept quite easily. I could go and play in different clubs. I was playing for cash, and it meant I could DJ at night, which meant I had my days free to do stuff. So I started making music with this equipment that I'd accumulated from working in the shops, and I started DJing and making tracks like the music I was DJing with. And I went and lived in New York, and I discovered house music and like real, going to all the hip hop clubs and going to the house clubs. And that really influenced me a huge amount, especially going to places like the Paradise Garage. That really, really influenced me because it was just like, wow, this kind of trippy dance music vibe, and very druggy and very sort of into the culture and like you do, when you're sort of 18, 19. And then I got asked to be the resident DJ at a nightclub called the Limelight, which was a big central London club at the time. So I came back there, and that was when things really started to hook into place, because I also, at the same time, I'd met this club that I was still DJing in down in Putney called Zeta's. I met these two bald guys who owned a gym, and they were doing music, and they'd passed me a cassette of demos that they were doing. And one of the demos was I'm Too Sexy, this song I'm Too Sexy. And I thought, well, that's funny. That made me laugh. And so I went back home and I had my equipment, and I had a little sampler, an S1000 Akai sampler, and a Atari 1040 computer. And I made what basically was the backing track for I'm Too Sexy. In about 3 hours, I did it. And it was utilizing things that I'd already was experimenting with, like pitch bend drum sounds and things like that, and organs. And I had one Roland sound box that created like organs and pianos and things like that. And that's all I used for that. And then the S1000. And I did.
Just for people who don't know this song by name, just how does it go quick?
I'm too sexy for my song, too sexy for my song.
Yeah.
Oh, I love's going to leave me. Yeah.
Massive hit.
So I went and I gave the guys a cassette of that. They loved it. And we went to the studio. We finished it off. Long story short, that became a massive hit. I can't remember, over 20 countries. I think it's number one in. I can't remember what it is. But it was a massive hit. And immediately I was a record producer. And I didn't know what that was. I knew record producers, people like George Martin and Trevor Horn and so forth. I knew them. I didn't really know what they did. Again, I'd never really had much experience. I did work in a studio for a while as a T-boy, but most of that entailed me having to sort of get drugs for the artists or go down the pub and get pints of lager for them or take some bunch of packages across London. It was never really sitting in the studio that much. So I didn't really know what I was doing. And so for the first sort of year of me having, after success of I'm Too Sexy, I was getting offered all these amazing jobs. And what I realized was that I said, I can't do these jobs because I actually I said to myself, I don't really feel comfortable doing it. So I went and did remixing because remixing was fitted in really nicely to DJing. And I could take the multi-tracks, all the tracks, and I would listen to how these tracks got put together. And I would, I see, that's what you did with the drums. That's really clever. And that's how you made the BVs. And so I taught myself on the job, basically, utilizing other people's work. Again, all this stuff is, you can find all this shit online now. Back in my day, there wasn't anything like that at all. There was nothing at all. No YouTube, nothing. So you had to find ways of learning this shit. And invariably, you learned it in studios, and I didn't learn it in studios. So, and then from that point onwards, I started becoming more and more successful as a producer and as a DJ, and they kind of ran concurrently. Got a bit burnt out, took some time off, went and traveled around Africa for a bit, found myself as you do, when you've earned a lot of money, and developed a very healthy drug habit. And then kind of came back feeling really kind of like, very focused. I only wanted to work on music that touched my soul. I only wanted to do things that really worked for me. And which was a great lesson and a strong lesson that I advise anybody to do if you get to a lucky position where you're just feeling the strain and it's too much. Just take time out. No one is wanting you to make music. No one is listening and waiting for you to make music. They want you to be healthy, right? So go and travel. Travel's the best thing. It really is. It opens up your mind. You meet new people. You find new cultures. You realize we're all the same. You can find new musical cultures, things that you will just fill your brain full of incredible experiences, which you can use as inspiration for songwriting or track building or whatever it is that you're doing. So go and travel.
BRB, I'm just going to end this podcast right now, book my flights and get on my way.
Okay, great noting, mate. Bye. And then, so then I came back to the UK and started working with bands, which was really interesting. And by this point, I was quite a successful DJ, traveling around the world anyway as a DJ, back in that sort of DJ culture back in the mid-90s, was already getting into sort of stadium kind of area. And I wasn't right up there, but I was pretty close, and I was earning decent money as a DJ. And then I just sort of went, I'm going to stop DJing because it's taking up too much of my time. I wasn't getting the creative outlet from it. And it was, it was too much. And I just said, I'm going to stop DJing. I'm going to write songs. So I became a songwriter. And I told my agent for DJing, I said, I cancelled all my gigs. I rang up my manager for production manager, and I said that I'm cancel anything. I'm not going to produce anything. I'm going to just sit and learn how to write songs. So I sat and learned how to write songs based on the fact that I knew I could write songs, but I didn't really feel confident to say I was a songwriter. So I signed to Sony Publishing as a songwriter, and I got put into all these different songwriting sessions and worked with loads and loads of different songwriters. And built up my chops as a songwriter. And I actually realized I was quite a good songwriter. Actually, I did know quite a lot about songwriting. That was just my usual kind of insecurity just holding me back. Don't let insecurity hold you back, kids.
I mean,
it really does.
Easier said than done, but it's just part of the journey, innit? Yeah.
It is part of the journey. So yeah, and that was great being signed to Sony, because obviously they opened up a lot of doors for me. Yeah, and I became a songwriter producer, and that sort of defined my life for a while. And then in 2008, I started getting a bit disillusioned and bored with all of this. And I happened to have a session with a guy called Jamie Scott. And Jamie and me really hit it off really good. He's great, amazing musician, great songwriter, and great singer. And we hit it off really well. And we started doing these kind of very different tracks to what he was doing. He was sort of singer-songwriter, folky, and then I was bringing in all these kind of club elements, but also kind of like old Northern soul and psychedelia and kind of 60s rock and all kinds of different really interesting angles that I was bringing into the pot as well, and unlocking in him. And we formed a collaboration called Graffiti 6. We met an amazing bonkers guy called Jimmy Crayon, who was a graphic designer, graffiti artist at the time. And he joined as part of our we were like a kind of collective. And we just did all this stuff. And then, of course, inevitably happened. We got really successful and we started touring loads. And then we got signed to Capitol Music. And that was really weird to be suddenly signed as an artist for the first time in my life. And toured around for a good couple of years, put a couple of albums out. It was amazing, really enjoyed the experience. But by that point, it was like, okay, I'm getting a bit too old for all this sort of stuff, and by that point I was married with a couple of kids, and it, just didn't start working. And Jamie also was like, he got married and he wanted to start focusing more on just songwriting. He became an extremely famous and successful songwriter, writing for Justin Bieber and One Direction and all kinds of people like that, and still smashing them out today. So we just were like, I just then was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? I don't want to go back to producing. And by this point, I was with Rosie, my wife, and I'd always been helping her out with her projects. And we started working closer and closer together. We had kids, and when we found it was easier to work together on projects. And through her, I started working with some incredible artists like Kanye and Jay-Z and Beyonce and Adele and all these amazing artists. And that would be a really interesting relationship, because it would be sort of production, but sort of not. And I would just be contributing ideas, which I really enjoyed, because it kind of went to the essence of what I love doing as music, which is.
What do you mean by that? What's production, but kind of not?
And what I think producing is, it's interesting the way that producing has become about beat making. But beat making to me it's incredible. It's very important, but it's no different from, bass line making and string making and horn making and vocal making and melody making and lyric making. They're all very much important. It's a bit like saying I'm a painter and I'm really good at orange.
Right.
It's like, yeah, okay, great. Well, I'll get you in if I need some orange, So when this producer concept is like, no, producers should be looking at the whole picture.
Yeah.
And they should be looking at like every aspect of it. And really, particularly if you're working with vocals, you should be the person that works with the singer. Because I know a lot of producers, they farm out that concept to other producers. You get the vocal producer, it's particularly in America, this happens a lot. I get that. But to me, it's missing one of the most lovely, most wonderful parts about working with artists, is that moment where you've helped the singer come up with that amazing performance. You've brought something out of them that's got that to that place, and you've created the atmosphere that's happened in, and you helped to put together the track and all those kinds of things. That to me is the real essence of production. But of course, really the big essence of the whole point about production is you deliver the track. That's it. You are the confidence in the project. You go to the A&R and everybody else and the management, and they go, it's finished. And they go, oh, well, if Tommy says it's finished, it's finished. And that's what you do. That's how producers generally are. And as a consequence, most great producers, and I mean this in the nicest possible sense, most great producers in the last sort of 15, 20 years have just been really good networking people who've got together millions of very, very talented people, great drummers, great programmers, great vocal producers, whatever, and they put a great team around that artist, and then they oversee what it is, and they work with the artist, obviously, that grand vision.
How do you know when a track is finished?
When the pub's open. I think the important thing is you have to set some boundaries. And then the important thing is knowing when to set those boundaries.
Yeah.
So there is a process. Let's say we're talking about making an album, right? And I love making albums. I've been very, very lucky to have made a number, of produced outright, which is very rare in this day and age, outright, quite a high number of platinum selling albums. And that's because I like working on albums. I work with an artist, I sit down with them and they sift through 100 songs that they've got and we talk about them and we work out things and we play me things they like and I play them things we like. And we try and find, sort of soundscapes and where they sing and we categorize the songs and break them down. Oh, that's a really good chorus. That's a great verse. Maybe we could put those two together. Have you thought about that? You're the co-creator with the artists or the band, and you become the fifth member of the band or the second half of the collaborative process. So when you make an album, at the beginning of the making of the album, it is like, the whole process of making an album is very much like having a child, in the sense that the first semester, so to speak, is very much a kind of experimental. It's very interesting, it's all new and everything you do is fucking great and it sounds amazing and it's really interesting. There's a lot of expectation, but there's nothing really concrete. It's all a little bit fluid and it's moving. And then you get into the second half, which is a bit sloggy, where you start to you go, well, this isn't actually sounding as good as I want it to. And now, I've got to have a really difficult conversation. Well, this song isn't as good. Do we rewrite the song? Do we scrap it? What do we do? This one's working, but I'm not happy about this. I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy comes in a lot in the second trimester of your album making process. And then the last trimester of the album is, it's just like the finished, you've got to just get the fucking thing finished. And you just want the bloody thing out. And you don't really, after that, you're just like, things that were hugely important, in the second trimester become less important because you just want to get the thing done.
Yeah.
And out.
For sure.
And the whole point about that being like a pregnancy is that a pregnancy lasts for 9 months. So really, you need to put a time limit on an album. You need to say, I need to make this album in 6 months. And I'm going to make this album in 6 months. Now, how you cut up that 6 months is entirely up to you. And in fact, I would argue that the first trimester, you shouldn't put a time limit on it. You should just let the shit happen. You should just let stuff happen. And the more you let stuff happen, the better. And then at some point, you then have to sit down with everyone and go, right, that's the release date. We have to deliver the album by this time. Now this is how we can do it. And that's when you start bringing structure in and you start making a lot more rules and laying things down and less about, right, we're not going to write any more songs. We're going to just focus on these songs. And of course, as soon as you tell an artist that you're not going to write any more songs, they start writing loads. This is part of the course. But that's so when an album is finished is when you have, you've said it. Now, of course, you can go over that time limit. You always can, particularly if you're an independent artist. But I do think it's really important. And I think as a producer, it's not a bad idea to line up another album afterwards or another project that you need to do. And also, I don't think take a break, if it's not really working or whatever, look, it's not working. I think we should take a month off and you go away and you have a holiday and go and get drunk and shag loads of people or whatever and get your heart broken. And then let's come back in a month's time and let's look at
what all about it. Yeah. Filling the well.
Right all about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got this term you probably relate. It's like, when you're creating, it's like you have this well, and it's like at some point you're going to get rid of you're going to empty the well and you just need to live your life again to fill it back up again. And then you write about it and repeat.
Yeah. I mean, creativity is, the whole concept about it is that you are drawing upon your experiences. And your experiences aren't things that you actually have in your conscious mind. They're things that everything that happens to you, everything that you surround yourself with on a 24-hour basis, because your senses never turn off. They're always on. So they're always picking up stuff and they're always feeding it into your brain. So the more you can change that up from a creative point of view, from creative people's point of view, the more you can make it more colorful. Fill it with color. And I don't mean color. I mean color, life, experiences, stuff. And that's why I said about traveling, that's really important. But also having relationships with people. If you break up with somebody, the best thing you can do is start a relationship straight away again. Because not because you're trying to get over with that person, but you are going on a journey to it. And if that relationship lasts a month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The point is that, this thing of like, as creative people, we need to be channeling emotion and then conveying it to the rest of the world to make the rest of the world feel okay about their own emotions. So it's a bit like, I need some time for me, so I need that time to me. Yeah, okay. But actually, as a creative person, I think that's the worst thing you can do. I think you're better off throwing yourself back into whatever situation it is that hurt you in the first place and really getting to the bottom of it. Because if you can find a solution to your pain and convey that through music, then you might help some other people with their pain. And how will you find that solution if you don't keep putting yourself in that position and learning from it? And I've had hundreds of relationships. And up until I met Rosie, my wife.
That's why you're so wise.
Yeah, I'd had quite a lot of relationships, and most of them had lasted probably about a year, maybe 2 years max at the most. And then I've been with Rosie now for 22 years. So that,
amazing.
Being with someone for 22 years, I can now come from that perspective and write songs about that, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. Wow, brilliant. Well, Tommy, it's amazing to delve into your story because you've been so supportive to me. But how on earth did you get into Web3, and what led you to that from your career up to then?
I think I've always been a little bit anti-establishment. Again, growing up with kind of the punk rock ethic and being around it all the time, being in London and really at the heart of it. And then seeing how that sort of culture mutated into other cultures, new romantics and hip hop, dance music. There's always an element of anti-establishment about it. There's always an element of two fingers up to the man. And I think you just grow up with that, and I love that. I've always been a bit sort of, just a bit of not a naughty boy, but I like to push the boundaries. I don't see the point in conforming on large scale levels. I think as a creative person, it's our role in society to bend the rules, because that's how society moves on. If it just stays within the rules the whole time, then it just goes round and round in circles. And there are many people who profit off of the rest of us all staying in our little lanes, and they don't like it when we change lane, because it's like, whoa, hang on a minute, we can't control you. And control is an interesting thing anyway, as the feeling of being controlled. I don't think anybody likes the feeling of being controlled at all. So Graffiti 6 kind of disbanded, and I was thinking, what should I do? Should I go back to producing? And I did. I produced a couple of albums for different artists. And I enjoyed it, but not as much. And there was a kind of nagging side of me that was a bit like, I think when you cross that bridge from doing, songwriting and production behind the scenes to being in front, but, behind the glass to being in front of the glass, so to speak. And you become an artist, and suddenly you experience this wonderful feeling of complete creative freedom. It's difficult to kind of go back and work on other people's music in that respect, like that. It's not impossible, but you lose something. Or certainly I did anyway. I know quite a lot of people, artists, they start artists first and then they go to producers, which is kind of weird. I started as a producer first and then went to an artist. But I wanted to just stay focused on continuing to make music that I was enjoying myself, and doing it myself and having that kind of creative freedom. But I wanted a side thing, and I also wanted to, again, try and test myself a bit more and do something different. So I thought, I'm going to do something completely not music orientated. And I was out one night with a friend who works for the drinks company Diageo, and I was telling him about my experiences with whiskey and how I've always been a whiskey man. And he said, why don't you start a whiskey company? And I was like, what? Oh, how do you do that? And he said, you get a liquid, you make up a recipe, you get a bottle, you make up a design, put the liquid in the bottle, and you go out there and market it. And I thought, liquid sounds like songs, bottle sounds like artist, design, market. I said, this is the music business, but just with whiskey, right?
Wow.
And he was like, yeah, probably, you know. And I thought, well, I can do that. I don't see a difference. I know that, you know, the marketing side of music, I can probably apply it to whiskey. And also nobody was doing whiskey for me, for my world. You know, I'd go out to clubs and festivals and, you know, if you were lucky, you got Jack Daniels. But there was vodkas coming out your ears, you know, vodka, Kettle One and Smirnoff, and everyone's, you know, Ciroc, and everyone's doing vodka. And it was like, I don't really like vodka. It's fucking, you know, it's basically car oil. You know, so I thought, well, I'll make a whiskey like that. So I created a whiskey. I partnered up with a mate of mine. We started a company called 808, named after the drum machine, and created a whiskey for nightclubs and festivals. And it was such an amazing experience because it was very much like doing music, and taught me a hell of a lot. Mostly it taught me about business, taught about starting a business and running a business, because I've been self-employed all my life. So I'd never had a business, never really been involved in business. And taught me all about concepts around shareholdings and management structures and boards and, you know, all this kind of thing, and raising money and, you know, equity and all this. And
did you have a knack for it? Did you find you had a knack for it straight up, or was it a big learning curve?
Yeah, I think not. I'm too non-conformist to be able to do it. Like, I'm not a CEO material. I'm certainly not. I thought I was. I'm not. I'm absolutely not. I'm a creative person, and creative people should be allowed to just be creative. Managers, I think the world is kind of split into creative people and managers, and you are really one or the other. I mean, of course, you can have traits of both, and I do have traits of both, but I'm a creative person, you know, and at that point you have to accept that that's what you do. And again, like music production, learning that you can't play every instrument and do all the programming and mix everything. You can't do that. You have to build a great team of really great people. And that's why I said early on about most of really genius producers have fantastic teams. And I have a saying, which is, if you want to look like a genius, surround yourself with geniuses, because, you know, that's how it is. And it's interesting, that concept, because it actually has gone on into my thinking around scenes, which we can come into later, the concept of what a scene looks like and why scenes are so important to creative people. Scenes are not just one creative person. There are loads of creative people, but there's generally one or two in there that are really amazing. If you think of, for example, the Chicago Bulls, you know, you had Michael Jordan. Wow, amazing. But you also had Scottie Pippen. You know, you had a few, and, you know, arguably Scottie Pippen became Scottie Pippen because of Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan definitely became Michael Jordan because of
I watched the documentary.
Pippen, you know?
It was so good.
Yeah,
and I don't like basketball. And it made me like basketball, actually.
That's the concept of humanity. That's why humanity works so well, because we work together so well as communities and teams. Yeah, so I built a great team around me for doing the whiskey. And then I was looking for ways of doing something really interesting with whiskey. Like I said, you know, nightclubs, festivals, I was always trying to do something a bit different. And that comes from doing music. You know, I would look at all the things that were successful and I go, great, well done. And then I'd go off over there and do something completely different. You know, I take with me what they were doing. Oh yeah, you're doing that. Okay, I'll take that over there. But I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't try and chase what they're doing, because they're doing it and they're successful at it. So why, you know, do something different. Same thing with whiskey. I didn't want to be like the traditional whiskeys. So I started thinking, that thing block Bitcoin that I was reading about back in 2012, you know, I'm going to start reading a bit more about that again and finding out what that means. And so I sort of started, this was around 2015, which was just the beginning of not the last bull run, but the bull run before, when it was all starting to pick up again then. And it suddenly, that was, and I was like, oh, and I discovered Ethereum had just come out. I think that came out a little bit later, maybe 2016, I think, or 2017, I can't remember. But it was around that time, and that was it, you know. And as soon as I started reading up about decentralization, it was like that wonderful, I know we talk about this a lot in this space, the blue pill moment, where it was like, whoa, the world is never going to seem the same ever again, you know. And you realize that if you need Bitcoin, why was Bitcoin developed? Why was a decentralized ledger developed in the first place? Because of these centralized systems like the banking institutions and governments and everything else that command every aspect of our life. And you suddenly realize that, we think we're in a world which is equal, and of course it's not. It's equal, but some people are more equal than others, and that's just that's the way it is. And does it need to be like that? Should it be like that? And that's the point where you go, the music business is exactly the same. I see that there are loads of amazing artists and they're not getting the breaks, and I saw that at the beginning before streaming, and then of course streaming has made. Personally, I think that streaming's made it even harder to break out and do stuff because it lures you into this full sense of. Sorry,
Old Street. You again.
There's always a bit of drama around Old Street in London. Here I am, Token Tracks offices in Old Street. There's always a bit of, there's always a bit of, in the music industry. There's always those that have the power and those that don't, and those that have the power and have the facility to flick the switch, and those that don't. And of course, music shouldn't be like that, because we all go, well, music's good and bad. That's it, and you have all your genres and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, music's good and bad. It's like, do I like that or do I not like that? That's it. That's the decision one makes. And then you think that should be a fair playing field with that consequence. And of course, it's not. It's not at all. It's absolutely not at all. So I started thinking about how I fell down the rabbit hole with blockchain, started buying coins, thought I was a day trader, lost a load of money, usual shit. I think everybody that goes into this, don't day trade, guys. Unless you've got that kind of slightly on the spectrum way of being able to stare at a chart all day long and make decisions based on little triangles going up and down. And if you want to do that and you're happy doing that and you love doing that, then do it. But if you're not drawn to it in the first place, you probably aren't interested in that. In which case you're just going to get lured in, and you putting money in on the thinking that you're going to make money is someone else making your money. All right. They're just going to take your money. The house always wins. It's gambling at the end of the day. And but I loved it, and I loved the technology, and I started formulating ideas around how the music business, as I knew it, being signed to majors, knowing the music industry, knowing major labels as I do, knowing artists as I do, having worked with thousands of artists of all different types of music. And I realized there was an opportunity for blockchain and music to come together, but I just knew that as it stood, decentralized, transparent ledgers that would help the music industry pay royalties on time and more efficiently was just completely against how the music industry works. The music industry works on jammed up royalties that take ages to come, so that they trickle down economies that everybody taking a little bit of the money as they go along until you eventually get it. And the whole structure of why recording major label deals is because of that, because equipment used to cost a lot of money. Studios used to cost a lot of money. Distribution used to cost a lot of money. It used to take ages for that money to trickle back. So people had to be signed for long periods of time.
I empathize so hard with that right now. It's been over a year now since my Robbie Williams show, and I'm owed publishing royalties for that. Still nowhere in sight.
From PRS?
From PRS to 100,000 people. So it should be a good check. And there's no time. I could really do that to really reinvest in my career right now. But of course, it's probably not. It's probably going to be another 6 months because it's international.
You might be able to borrow against it,
Okay, well,
to borrow against it.
We'll talk about that. But the fact is, the blockchain would fix that.
In effect, yes. But of course, that goes against the way the whole of the music industry is structured right now. And I'm not talking about just the infrastructure. I'm talking about the legalities around it. And that's an extremely powerful lobbied industry. So it never really felt like I could fit those two pieces together efficiently. And it still, to a degree, feels that way. But we can. It feels better now. I can come on to why that is. But when NFTs, I was a bit late to the game with NFTs. I think the first NFT project I got my head around was CryptoKitties. I think that was 2019. And that was the point where I went, oh, you mean this shit can be fun? Can be fun as well? Oh, I quite like that. It can be fun. It isn't just, boring tokens and decentralized ledgers and all this kind of stuff. It's like, oh, it's funny pictures. Oh, that's kind of nice, But it took me a while to get that little extra bit, which is, this is a unique digital asset. This is kind of cool, because everything in music is a unique asset. So the way the world is going is more and more digital. I've got 2 teenage kids. I watch them all day long, living their lives on their phones. And it coincided with them playing Minecraft and Roblox all the time and going, so what the hell are you doing on there? And they would ask me for money, They'd ask, can I take 20 quid so I can buy this? And I'd be, what are you buying? You're buying a jacket or, a face. My daughter bought a face once. And it was like, so do you make, and you say, yeah, I sold the face for, I bought it for 2,000 Robux and I sold it for 10,000. I was like, whoa, give me the money. She's like, oh, no, it just stays within the game. And I was like, whoa. So you give money to the game to buy a currency that you can only ever keep in the game. I was like, whoa. And that was a moment where I was like, this could be applied to music. This whole concept could be absolutely applied to music.
What do you envision? How would it apply to music?
Well, because...
Do you have an example?
If music... Okay, so everything has value. And music has many different value metrics. The most obvious one is listening to music. When you listen to music, you should be paying for that privilege to listen to the music. And that's how the music industry has been structured so far, whether it was through vinyl or cassette or CD or radio or TV or whatever. When you were listening to the music, you had to pay a royalty. Whoever was using that music would have to pay a royalty back to the copyright owners, right? So that's the most obvious one. But then you start thinking about all these other peripheral things that the music industry up to now has created. And if you think about them, like, okay, so playing gigs is obvious, right? Throughout the whole of history, musicians have played gigs, right? And recordings have come from people playing gigs. Remember that. Recordings come from that. The gigs were first, and then recorded music allow music to travel when the artists themselves couldn't travel. So suddenly you're getting all your music played all around the world when you don't need to be played around the world.
Yeah.
But it's still playing music. And then off the back of that, people were like, well, why don't we create some T-shirts and some hoodies and some tote bags and some badges? And that's merch. It's still all associated with it. And now, slowly but surely, we're seeing other things coming out. And obviously, then how does all of that work when you're in the digital world? So everything has value and should be ascribed to value. All ideas have value. Value as a concept, as a commodity, was first sort of ingrained in IP back in the 1700s. In British law, in fact, was the first civilized society that enshrined the concept of idea ownership, that if I had an idea, I owned it, I was the creator of that idea, therefore I could trade that idea. And if you used my idea, you would have to pay me to use it, right? And that's what IP is, intellectual property. So, and it's a good word, intellectual property, because it does sum it up quite nicely. Intellectual property. It's like property, I own that property. And it's an intellectual thing. So digital property, where we're going with all of this stuff, that has a very interesting concept. I think at the moment, we're only scratching the surface of what that actually means in the digital world. Because what we're effectively doing is just bringing the real world into the digital world. And I'm reminded of like when TV first started, a lot of the TV stations, the people that ran the TV stations came from radio. So everything they put on the TV, like the news, for example, so the news is a good example. The news was just what they did on the radio. So what they did on the radio was it would just be like a guy just saying, this is this, and this happened today, and that happened today, and, and then this happened, and then, here's the weather. And that's what they did on the TV. And they just had a guy going, this is the news, this is what happened today. And then suddenly someone went, well, it's visual, right? So we could do something else with this. We could get we could go somewhere, we could film something else, and then we could intersperse that in with the studio stuff. And suddenly the concept of the news program for TV that was a different model to the radio program became out. So this was an example of creative people doing stuff that was interesting using the technology of the time. And that's what I think will happen with Web3. I think the way the world will be in 10 years' time, we haven't seen it today yet. It's not there yet. And when we talk about, and I'm slightly jumping ahead of myself here, but when we talk about what's going to happen to Web3 and when all these people are going to come in and all that, all we're doing is we're thinking really blinkered, because we're thinking like how it is now, and not realizing that if you look at all the tech adoption, now is just part of the journey. Now is just we're at the place where radio was before they realized they could do like outside broadcasts, and they could go off and they could do features, and they could film features that they could intersperse in. We are only now beginning to see, with things like AI, we're beginning to see how music will actually be engaged with. And I'm telling you, it will be completely different to where it is now. It really will. I'm strongly believe that, because of the technology that's allowing and opening up things to do. The concept of the charts and worldwide artists and all those sort of things, that all revolves around technology. That all revolves around the technology to make music travel. And when you disrupt that concept so greatly, like we are doing within Web3 and we are doing with AI, you're going to see big changes, because people are going to go, well, actually, I don't want that. I just want this. I really like this artist that's down the road that I really like. I want him. I want them. I'm not interested in Taylor Swift or Adele or Ed Sheeran. I'm interested in this little artist over here. And I'm not saying you can't do both. Yeah. And there will be a vibe for that. But I do believe that having relationships with musicians on a more personal level is going to become so much more attractive to individuals than blindly following Ed Sheeran and 90,000 million other people. I mean, there's part of the acceptance of wanting to fit in and be part of, go to an Ed Sheeran gang because there are 100,000 people in the auditorium and you feel like you're part of them. And also you feel like, well, I got in and you didn't. It's like, well, yeah, you did, and 99,999 people also did. But this guy down the road that is playing in front of 10 people, he's the next Ed Sheeran, and you were there first. And that, all of those sorts of concepts are really, really interesting. So it was a very, very long-winded answer.
I think the age of the idol is going to dissipate. It's going to be more than that, where you don't just want to put someone on the pedestal, but you could literally have access to their inner community and even grow as part of their team. One of the most exciting things for me right now is that I'm hiring and building teams with my NFT holders, which is incredible. And for me, I'm so excited about that, because I already know that they're in it for the right reasons. Like, they've invested in me from the very beginning, and I trust these guys more than I trust a lot of music industry executives, because I know they believe in me, and they might not have the skills yet, but for the people who have put themselves forward, they're already doing whatever it takes to quickly learn it and be a part of my journey in that bigger way. And for me, that's like, I'm just getting a bit emotional just thinking about that. It's like, how freaking cool is that to like have a global community? And actually, neither of us live in the same country, let alone city. And I've not even met every single one of them, but we're already best mates, and I know they're working so hard already. And for me, I'm super picky as well, Tommy. Like, for me to build a team with someone, you need to get at least 80 to 90% of the same capacity of working hard level, right? Because I'm 110%, and that's partly why I don't have a manager right now. Back to self-booking, because no one can keep up. And I believe there are people in the world who keep up, but you kind of need to throw yourself at the deep end to find the right people as well, and I actually think my community members in my community are one of those people.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what I said earlier on about the manager thing. You know, sometimes some of the best managers are the people that you grow up with. And the reason why they're great is because they are committed and engaged in what you're doing, and they fall in love with you effectively. You know, not in a kind of creepy way, but just in a genuine admiration way. And I think that, you know, when you know, this is one of the interesting things about what we've certainly seen over the last sort of 2-3 years of being in this Web3 space, is the way that you can, you know, funnel down your fan base into a very small number. And it doesn't need to be that big. And this is the thing. I think people talk about NFTs. Oh, yeah, I sold 1,000 this and 2,000 of that, and I sold out. Actually, really, if you can sell 10, that's a great starting point, because probably out of that 10, you're going to find 1 or 2 people who you can connect, like you say, can connect with on this kind of level. And you can use them to come in and help you sort of organize your life and structure your life in a way that means that you can then go out and build more. And you find another 10 or another 20 this time, and then you build out more and you build out more. And eventually, yeah, you know, maybe you have 100. But there's an article that I wrote, I called it 100 True Partners, and it's an extension of the article that Kevin Kelly wrote, who's the founder of Wired magazine. He wrote an article back in 97, I think it was, maybe a bit later. It could be later, 2007 actually, I think it was, called 1,000 True Fans. And it said you don't need all these likes, you don't need millions of streams, you just need 1,000 fans that are prepared to give you $100 a year, and that's 100,000, which to most people is a living wage. And I kind of extended it and said, well, actually, you don't need 1,000, you just need 100, because with Web3 technology, what you can do is generate that 1,000 from Web3, from NFT sales. And this was back when, of course, royalties were still enshrined, so on secondary sales. And obviously, that's an argument that's still ongoing as to whether that's going to continue. But you know, the idea that you would always get a royalty back from every time your NFT sold would mean that you just need 100 people to be your partners. And partners is different. It's different to fans. Fans is a kind of one-sided relationship, really, where, you know, you're just providing. It's like, feed me. Oh, you're doing a gig. Oh, yeah, you know, and yeah, okay, they come to the gig or whatever, they stream your music, whatever, they do that. But partners is when you have a vested interest in it. You know, them coming to a gig, what do they get out of that? Bit of social media action. Oh, Josh's gig. Oh, lucky you, you know. But they don't get anything out of it. They certainly don't get any monetary aspect out of it. Whereas partners in a company or partners in a relationship or whatever, you're working together for the good of the company. You're working together for the good of the partnership, for the good of the community. You are working together to do that. And you only need really 100 people to build towards that. So you start with 2, and then you gravitate to 4 and 5 and 10 and 20. And before you know it, you've probably got yourself probably somewhere between 50 and 100 people that are a part of your community that you know you can draw upon. This person does that. This person knows this person, that, you know, blah, blah, blah. And some of them will be more engaged than others, but it doesn't matter. They're helping you because they own a stake in Josh Savage. And that's a very powerful concept. If we can expand this out, I think we've got something.
So how do we expand it out?
Well, my favorite saying at the moment is, how do you eat an elephant? Huge, great big elephant. You've got to eat it one little piece at a time. But the question is, what piece do you start with?
Yeah.
And going back to my story about the radio and TV, radio had to go through a journey that was what it knew, it put on TV. And then it realized when it was on TV that it could do so much more, and it started to branch out to where we have now news programs, 24-hour news programs that have to be filled with all kinds of content, and as a consequence now are very much defining the narrative of what in fact is going on in the world, because 24-hour news is dry, you know, it has to be fed. So everything suddenly is a huge, big problem. It's massive. And then, you know, in an hour's time, there's another huge, big problem and it's big drama. And so in fact, it's dictating so much more than just, you know, hello, this is the news, you know. So which is what it used to be, right? So what does that actually mean? It means that if we work out how to engage with people at the point where they're at today and take them on a journey, I think, you know, if you are in a room and you are, you know, you're you're wanting to leave and your girlfriend's on the other side of the room and you just shout sort of, "Oh, I'm leaving," right? It's going to like look a little weird. So you have to go across to the room to where she is and you have to be part of the conversation, and you're going to have to look to her and catch her eye and say, I'm going to go now. Do you want to come with me? Or it's fine if you want to, you know what I mean? You have to go to where they are. Right. And then it's not a big deal. You know, your missus doesn't get upset because you've shouted across the room and looked like you made some hissy fit. What do I actually mean by that? Go to where the people are and talk to them and bring them on this journey. Don't stand here and expect them to come to you. So in 2020, armed with all this information and knowledge, and armed with COVID staring down the barrel of a loaded gun and thinking, where is everybody going to make their money out of music anymore? I decided to put my money where my mouth is and create a company. I'd done it with 808, with a whiskey. So I was very comfortable with the idea of building a company. Rang up some people, got a team together, and we formed Token Tracks back in late 20. Well, we came up with the idea in 2020, formed it properly in 21, raised a bunch of money, built the team out, and then launched a token in 2022, launched a marketplace in 2022. And the whole idea of it was to say, right, I'd been there, because I'm old enough to been there at the beginning of the internet. And more importantly, I think I was more established by this point when I got to the beginning of social media, right, and then streaming. You know, I was actually part of a sort of focus group of producers for Spotify back in the day, where we would sort of beta test their stuff and sort of help them understand how to get across into the music industry. And you know, understanding how huge, difficult journey that was for a streaming company like Spotify to get people to understand a very simple thing, which is they didn't need to own music anymore. They could rent it. That was a huge undertaking for the entire industry, for consumers, everything. You know, it was massive. And then Miles Leonard, who works with me at Token Tracks, he said he used to, you know, he ran Parlophone, Warner Music. And he says, it's hilarious. We spent years telling people that they don't need to own music anymore, that they can just, you know, rent it. And now we're telling people they shouldn't be renting music anymore. They should be owning it.
Why should people be owning music today after everyone's just been converted to renting it?
Well, I don't think they should be. I don't actually think I think the streaming model works fine. It's a great consumer experience for everyone involved, including artists. They can upload their music to streaming sites. It can be available to listen to anywhere around the world. And, you know, if I hear a track in a club, I can Shazam it. I can send it to you. You can send it to Violetta. Violetta can send it to someone else. We can put it in playlists. We can share it. It's fucking amazing. It is, as an experience, as a creative, artistic listening experience, it is second to none. The problem comes when you try and monetize this as a concept. And also the problem comes from, and that's not just necessarily streaming or particularly Spotify's problem. I mean, this is a system-wide problem. This is the industry as we know it. The bottom line is that the music industry does not value music as well as it should. And the reason why is because it's betted on the wrong horse time and time again.
Which horse is that?
Well, the holes of it predominantly started with the idea of focusing. So when CD came along in the 80s, they focused on, the music industry focused on the idea that you needed to buy a CD because it was better quality and it was a better way of listening to music, and you could spread strawberry jam all over it and wash it off and it would still sound the same, right? You know, and everybody had to go back out and buy all their music again that they just accumulated for the last 20, 30 years on vinyl, on cassette. They had to go out and buy it all on CD. Influxed a huge amount of money into the music industry. Music industry suddenly became very, very rich very quickly. And it went, well, hang on a minute. This works. We can sell the product that music comes in. We don't care about the music. We just sell the product that music comes in. That's the big thing. So then they started doing it with mini disc. They tried to do it with mini disc and then DAT. And then, of course, digital kicked in and pirates and all that. And it just constantly always became about the medium with which the music is delivered in, and very little about the music itself, and very little about anything else to do other than trying to listen to music. So there were all these avenues that were there that were just quietly sort of forgotten all about, because the cash cow was the product that the music came in. CD, vinyl, whatever. Companies like MTV went, well, hang on a minute. People like watching music. They don't just like listening to it. They like watching it. So we'll create a TV show and we'll just put all these videos on. And the record company said, right, so how much are you going to pay us to show these videos? And MTV went, no, you should be paying us. We're providing you a platform where you can, your music can be showcased. Everybody wants to be on MTV. So then MTV, and then the music business went, okay, we'll do that. That sounds fine. And so basically at that point, the shift of balance changed from the platform being in control to the music industry, from the music industry being in control to the platform being in control. The platform, and then of course MTV, then you go into App Store, you go into Pirate Bay, you go into App Store, Apple's App Store, you go into streaming, and so on and so on and so on. But that moment, it all started with MTV. It started with that moment where the platform said no, and the music industry went, yep, turned around and let them fuck them up the arse, basically.
Do you think the music industry could have said no and history would have gone a completely different course? Or do you think something else would have come along and we'd still end up here eventually? Good
question. I think inherently the biggest problem comes down to artists themselves. And this is not entirely their fault, but let's face it, artists will kill their granny for a hit. And, if I turn down and go, I'm sorry, I'm not working, you can't, as a producer or you as a performer or whatever, if you say, no, I'm sorry, I'm £1,000 and that's it. There are 20 other people back behind you who'll do it for 200.
Right.
And then there's 50 people behind there who'll do it for a tenner. You know what I'm saying?
So, you know what, Tommy, that's partly why I love Germany, is that they take a lot more of a stand about that. And that's why here you play in a bar, like you'll get some financial return. In London, you're lucky to get a free pint. And that's because everyone's kind of devalued as a musical community down where you just don't get anything. And I do fear, actually, Tommy, that is potentially where the Web3 music scene is going right now, where the value of the initial mint of music NFT drops currently are just getting more and more devalued, where it's just going to be worse than Web2, because at least you get streaming royalties with Spotify, and you don't currently on the blockchain.
It's a great point. And I think, you just look at other industries. I mean, generally speaking, if you want the answer to how things are, it's there somewhere in the world. There's an answer. Someone's doing this already, or some industry's doing this already.
So artists take a stand.
Issue,
value yourself.
The biggest problem we have is but without knocking artists too much, I mean, we all should be supported. We should all be members of the Musicians Union, and we should all support the Musicians Union. That's the first thing you should do anyway, regardless, right? And you should try and take a stand.
I don't know if Germany has the equivalent, but the Musicians Union in the UK is incredible. Just the fact you pay 200 quid a year or something like that, you get free legal advice for like an hour for each contract, is incredible. Like, that's massive. And then it gives you advice and whatnot. And we need one for Web3, like ASAP, before.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it as a concept, what it would look like. It's sort of, the thing is that obviously when you centralize, anything centralized is not very Web3, and the concept of a union is centralized, but
right, I guess, yeah.
But it's not, it's the whole essence of Web3 is like the market decides, it's free market and everything's, that's fine as long as you're working within, the concepts of Bitcoin. And unfortunately, everything else isn't in that concept. Most things are, most of the things as a consequence are centralized.
Can you delve more into token tracks about what you're building and how you're supporting artists today?
So in 2020, formed Token Tracks, and really the idea was to say, as I said, I was all through, all these different technological advances and watched them from the bylines and then watched the damage that they did. And so when I realized there was an opportunity to mix blockchain and music together, I thought, well, I want to be part of the conversation. I want to be at the forefront of that conversation. I want to even lead the conversation. I want to be part of that kind of, the team or whatever, or the bunch of us that are the pioneers in this space. And it also coincided with me finding Twitter Spaces and meeting a lot of you guys and sort of getting to know and hearing your stories and really resonating with a lot of your stories. Resonating with the fact that you felt that you were shafted by the music industry and thinking, well, yeah, I mean, I've been shafted by it. I've made a lot of money out of the music industry, but I've also been shafted by it. And, being on the end of, I was signed to EMI as an artist, as Capital as an artist, and then, Capital got bought by Universal, and suddenly I had a whole new A&R department that didn't even know anybody, it was there, and it was very weird. So I was like, right, well, I built a company. I've had to 8 whiskey before. I can build it. So, started Token Tracks. And Token Tracks, the fundamental concept around Token Tracks is to have a bunch of very clever music business experienced people like myself, and a very, very clever bunch of Web3 tech people, and put them in a room with some really decent management, and then just get everybody talking about the music industry and thinking about ways to improve it using this technology. And over time, this is mutated into, as I said, how do we eat an elephant one small piece at a time? You start with engaged behavior. So looking at already engaged behavior that we can tokenize and find a way to make the experience between a fan and an artist, and then that person, that essential person that's in the middle, which I call the curators, the person that discovers the artist and shares it with the fans. I call it the 3 C's, so creators, collectors, and curators, that one in the middle, and collectors obviously being the fans. How do you make that ecosystem more efficient and more in keeping with what they need, make it more relevant to the needs of those 3 C's? Because if you actually look at the current music business model, it's just so not fit for purpose for how people like music. And streaming is one of those areas which is brilliant, because anybody can put their music up and you can find it and you can share it and you can listen to it. And it is one of the areas that they do get right. But then there are so many aspects of streaming that are so fucking wrong, and obviously they're designed to make money for the platforms themselves, which is, we live in a capitalist society. It's understandable. They have shareholders, they've raised money, they have loans, all that kind of stuff. So, you can kind of understand all this concept, but I just really love the idea of formulating ideas. Principally, about a year ago, we realized that we spent a lot of money, best part of $5 million, developing a lot of tech for our own platform. And we were like, well, why don't we just give that tech to the communities that actually need it, as opposed to, trying to get the communities to come and be on our platform? 2 reasons, really. First and foremost, that's the concepts of Web3, and the concepts of Bitcoin and decentralization are that there is a million networks of decentralized systems that are all run by the technology that they're run on, and not necessarily by centralized platforms. And although, as I said, we're on a journey and we're nowhere near where I think we should be, but the idea of having decentralized servers, which I think is where we should be in 10 or 20 years time, which is, so we don't have to rely on Amazon or Google or whatever. We have decentralized systems, servers that we can build on top of. That concept's really interesting to me. So how do we get there? Again, we start with engaged behavior. We start with things that fans actually want from musicians. They don't want to listen to their music because that bit of that equation is already done. It was already catered for with streaming. So we're not talking about listening to music. We're talking about all the other aspects around music. And as I said, that could be gigs, it could be merchandise, it could be meet and greets, it could be live streams, it could be signed copies of something, or a baseball cap that you wore on the night of the gig, or whatever. It could be a personalized song, it could be handwritten lyrics, it could be colored vinyl, it could be anything. But also, it could be a whole load of new things that we haven't even thought of yet. And that's the bit which really gets me really excited. But we start with the things that we do know, and we start with all that list that I said. And we build out a very simple system so that an artist like yourself can have a home which they can use technology that they can use and they can rely upon to create this experience for their fans. Their fans, this experience being, they can buy a VIP pass simply with credit card. It's on a low gas, like Polygon or Zilliqa blockchain. They don't even know they're buying something on a blockchain. They have a custodial wallet that is created for by the platform. They don't even need to know about MetaMasks and all that. Make it a no-coiner experience. And then they have that VIP pass and they go, right, now I go down to the gated area. This is Josh's perk session. He's going to be performing tonight at 9 p.m. They turn up at 9 p.m., connect their wallet, boom, it opens, and there's the performance. And their mate who hasn't got the NFT is like, shit, I would have really liked to have got that. I would like to see this performance. And like, you can't, you need the NFT, and they're all sold out. Now that is something where I think everybody can relate to, and I think the incredibly important part of that is it's all in your world. It's your domain. It's your home. It's you. You own it. It's your technology. Even though we've developed it, we give the technology to you. We call it the Track Studio. We call it the Track Studio because a studio is a place which has equipment, which has technology. It has a mixing desk and some speakers and maybe a couple of, and like a drum kit and some amps and some guitars and some outboard kit or whatever. It has a place which is developed for you. It could be your Ableton with all your plugins. It doesn't really matter. It's a studio. But it's all developed there. It's all technology. It's not going to create the music for you. You're still going to have to do the hard work. You're still going to have to do all of that. But it gives you those tools to create something. So the Track Studio is like a Lego. I call it the Lego board, like the board that you build Lego on top of. It's the board, and we have pieces that we fit on that we develop ourselves. But we also are now going out to third-party companies and building up really strong relationships with lots of different third-party companies that are building their own bits of Lego that will come and fit on our Lego board. And we've had 2 meetings this morning alone with 2 very, very big Web3 companies that are very interested in what we're doing and wanting to be partners with us. And I think that is something that's really, really powerful about this concept is that, yes, you could go and build all this stuff yourself and, by all means do. But when we're building it and we've done it and we're partnering up with loads of people to make that experience better, then, and it's still yours, we still give you that technology, why wouldn't you be looking to partner with us as opposed to,
right.
doing it, trying to spend, a couple of $1 million yourself on doing something that's probably, and then you still got to manage it. As you know, you still got to have a dev to keep the thing going and blah, 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 and all that business. Now, that's the blue sky. That's the science fiction philosophy. That's where we're going. That's where we want to go. Are we there yet? No, we're not there yet, but we will be there and we will get there quite quickly. And with the amazing support of people like yourself and incredible artists like yourself, we'll get there even quicker. So, it's extremely exciting times. I love being in this space because I really feel like I did back in, 88, 89.
I was going to ask you whether it's similarities.
Yeah. It really feels very much like that whole continuation of that whole narrative of 2 fingers up to the man and we're doing something different and fuck you, we can do this. And I don't need you. That's the interesting, that's a brilliant thing about being an artist. And that's the problem with the music industry is that we're constantly told that we need this. We are being duped into thinking that we can only go to Spotify and we can only go to Amazon and we've got to be on there because that's where all the eyeballs are. But you tell me, how is that experience working out for you? How is the experience of having 1 million views on a video in TikTok? are you really getting something out of this? Is this really, is it working for you? And let's say that's great for now, but what happens in 5 years' time when another TikTok comes in, and Threads suddenly appears and it suddenly takes over the world and suddenly has a resurgence, or Friendtech? It could be any of these, it could be what happens and those kind of things. And this is why it's so, I think, and I implore to artists, particularly like people like yourself, have your own, going back to your own website and building out your own domain again. Because I actually feel that that's where things are going back to. It's going back to the idea of all of us, having our homes, these domains that we control, and the data we control, the data. As you know, with digital wallets, what that actually means is so powerful, because you can utilize where you go on the internet. You can utilize that. And this is where it's going for. This is what the whole concept of Web3 is. That, Web 2 was, I go to Amazon, I buy something from Amazon, I go and listen to a track on Spotify, I watch a video on YouTube, and I post something on Twitter. And none of those things are connected in any way. Nothing is connected. It doesn't matter what I did. Now, from a civil liberties point of view, maybe that's a good thing. But wouldn't it be great if I was in charge of whether that engagement was important? So if I went and bought something from Amazon, then when I went to listen to a track on Spotify, it went, hang on, you just bought this thing on Amazon, and because you did that, I'm going to unlock this bit here, this track that you couldn't hear before, but because you just bought something from Amazon. Oh, and then you tweeted this, so that's great. You get a chance to go to the show, because you bought that thing on Amazon and you tweeted about it, and then you listened to this track on Spotify. Well, then here, you can go to the show. And actually, I think, even though that sounds slightly Big Brother, I think that's really super exciting and super powerful, because it means that all our experiences in life will be much more tailored. And it means we can actually give our attention and our energy to the things that we love and we want to give them to, and be rewarded for.
Yes.
And that, I think, as a human being, is what I want. So that part of what Web3 is all about, i.e. the digital wallet, is not a wallet, it's a passport. It tells me it tells the internet where I've been, if I want it to, and that's the big difference. If I want it to, if I don't want it to, then it don't.
Sure.
But it gives me the option to say, okay, there's a benefit for me to tell the internet that I've been to these places because I get X, and that's something super powerful. And I think that we sleep on that sometimes in this. We talk about collectability and we talk about, the floor prices and all this kind of stuff, forgetting that actually the whole point of this is ownership and the amount of different things that we own. We saw it a little bit about a year ago, where you started seeing things like, oh, well, if you go connect your wallet and you've got a Bored Ape in there, then you get discount on this. And if you, whatever. But it's all become a bit siloed again. It's like, for example, your project, it's like you have to only have something like this, and then you get, the stamps project. But for example, you could also, and you guys have all done this, I know you have, you've all said, oh, well, if you own one of Violetta's frames, or, and you own one of Sammy's this, and you own my NFTs, then you get that, and I think the more that people do that is actually the more exciting this space becomes, because that's collaborative, that's human, that's beautiful, but it's also people supporting each other. And the whole essence of what we're doing with Track Studio is to make them all network together. So, thousands of people have got track studios out there, and they've all got the opportunity to surface each other's material. So everyone's kind of helping each other and collaborating with each other as well. Yeah. Then you get people appearing, who know about music, and that's where the curation concept comes in, and it starts growing. And that's why we launched curator labels with Jamie's Sound of Fractures and Martin Wellraven, when they created Wild Awake, and this concept of having a label, and those labels being places where you don't own the rights to the music, but you have a shared experience with an artist to help them onboard them into this space and get them curious about it. It's very interesting watching the artists who, they did an NFT through Wild Awake, sold all right. All the Wild Awake drops were only 12 NFTs on ETH. And they did these drops. They all sold out. They had a lovely experience, very warm, whatever. They went back to streaming. They become, on the whole, they've become disillusioned and realized that it wasn't fun. They've come back to NFT, and they're now back talking to Jamie about wanting to do more drops.
Fantastic.
That's powerful. That's super powerful. And it's small, and maybe people don't realize how powerful that is and how significant that is. But the concept of artists like yourself bringing other people on that don't know what they're doing, having a home that you can do that. You can do that with a track studio. Right now, you don't have that. You would give them to Sound, or you give them to OpenSea or whatever, and good luck.
Yeah.
If you have your own marketplace that you can launch artists off of, that's super cool.
Yeah. Tommy, to finish on, fundamentally, what is the value of owning a music NFT to you? And how should artists get started? Where should they learn? And where can they start to speak to you guys at Token Tracks to start working with you as well?
I think the value of a music, I think the value of anything in this space is the experimental concept of it. If you believe in the things that I talked about just then and the things that we all talk about, if you believe that that is the future, then you need to experiment. You need to experiment from your point of view, whether you're a creative, whether you're a curator, or whether you're a collector, whatever it is that you do, or whether you're all three. You need to be part of that journey. And like anything in life, you can't do that unless you just get out there and do it. You need the experience to see how it works for you and what you like about it and what you don't like about it. So I think at this moment in time, I don't think there's a long-term value potentially. And I wouldn't look at it like that. I look at it as a way. I buy NFTs because I'm experimenting with this space and I'm seeing how I fit into it and what it feels like and what I like about each one of those experiences. I'm using NFTs. I'm buying NFTs of artists that I admire and I like musically in the same way that I would have bought their records or whatever. But the beautiful thing about buying their NFTs is I can actually connect with them directly. Obviously, I've got quite a big status in this space anyway, so it's not difficult for me to reach out to artists and talk to them. But if you are a fan and you're interested to know how to get into the space, just start buying people's NFTs and look at it as the same amount of money that you would spend if you went to college or if you were investment. It's an investment. It's an investment in you to learn about this space. But at the same time, you're supporting artists that you really genuinely care about. So is it any different from tipping somebody a $5 on the tube or $10 on the tube, because you just like them and they're playing some nice music, or going to see them in a concert or whatever, or buying their hoodie or whatever? There's no difference. So, and in fact, more of the money from an NFT goes directly to an artist immediately than in any other kind of concept. If you make music, you've got to have equipment to make that music. If you have merch, you've got to bought the merch up front. If you do a gig, you've got to spend money to go out and can't do that gig and all that kind of stuff. So, NFTs don't cost you anything, even if it's just music that you've knocked up on GarageBand on your phone or whatever and put some art together on Midjourney. It doesn't make any difference. It can be a relatively low output, as long as you like what they're doing and you like the thing, and then great, then buy it. So that's the first thing I would say. And then in regards to coming onto Token Tracks, if you're an artist, you want to come on Token Tracks, just reach out, just DM the Token Tracks Twitter account, or myself, Tommy Danvers, on Twitter, DANVERS, on X, yeah, Twittex. And or you can just come to our website and you can sign on through there as well, and just start that conversation. We've got bunch of guys here who all they do all day long is onboard artists and help artists come on board. We're a bit different to most other music NFT platforms. I think we're a lot more hands-on in helping artists come on board, and we'll try and keep that ethos at the heart of everything we do. I think a lot of what we're doing at the moment is education and exploring new concepts. But I'm very, very intrigued, to see where the artists like you and V and Ray and, who've been in this space. I'm really excited to see where you guys go now, because you're the pioneers and you've set so many precedents that other people are now following. And I think it's time now to sort of almost draw a line underneath that part of what this journey was all about and go, right, what's the next thing to do? Because I don't know if you can ever keep selling NFTs. I don't know if that's the concept. I'm not sure if the concept is that, or if the concept at this moment, certainly at this moment, I think it's more about creating a really cool community and wanting to be a member of that community. So the more NFTs you make, the easier it is to be part of that community, which means it's not so fun anymore, you know? So there needs to be some kind of, you know, we talked about making albums, and I was saying you need some boundaries. And maybe the idea of like, okay, you know, there's only ever 1,000 NFTs of Josh Savage, and if you can't afford to buy one, well, you know, tough.
888 actually.
There you go.
You know, I relate.
Time to put out another 120.
Yeah, I relate with you a lot on the 8s with your 808, like businesses and collections and stuff. Awesome, Tommy. Well, mate, it's been such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your time. It's actually incredible tapping more into your journey because, like I said earlier, you've been so supportive with mine and so giving, and it's been amazing to hear more of that and what led you to here today. I didn't even know half the things, so thank you for being an open book on that. And yeah, Tommy, thank you one more time.
Thank you.
Big love to you. Everybody follow his X account. Your space happens every Monday, right? And it's the longest running music space. And
regular. I think it's only fair on Nifty and Fifi that they have the longest running spaces, but mine is the longest running. It's always been on Mondays at 6 p.m. and bar a few odd moments where I've been on planes and stuff. We've done it every week. But it's come. I mean, you asked a question also about where to go. I mean, Twitter Spaces, I still think is one of the best places to go and learn about this stuff, you know, because you get really up-to-date information. You do have to wade through a load of, bro. You have to wade through a load of that.
Yes, you do.
And don't listen to the stoned Yanks, you know, generally speaking, in any time where it's late night in America. There's always a few too many stoned Yanks.
You never know, though, do you? You do have to kind of just tread around and find what works for you. And I guess what's good about Spaces is that you don't physically have to do it. So that's really powerful because you can jump from one room to the next, and that saves you a lot of time as well. Anyway, we could literally keep going on for hours. Anyway, this has been fantastic. So thank you very much, Tommy.
No, thank you, mate. You're a great artist and a beautiful, and you are the typical brilliant artist that's in this space that just hasn't had breaks, you know, and yet you're finding your feet, and it's beautiful to watch, man. So long may you reign, mate.
Thanks, mate. Well, thanks for being a part of that. Big love.